Then, of course, if you can't resolve it, you've done the bylaw enforcement process and you can't resolve the issue of the animal being a nuisance, it comes to conciliation. And that's where you're definitely going to have some sort of evidence that is an actual nuisance issue or breaches of those conditions or the bylaws. And of course, if it can't be resolved at conciliation, the next step is adjudication. And that's conciliation. Remember, conciliation is agreement where the parties come to an agreement. Okay, and the committee can make decisions, or the person representing the committee is authorised to make decisions, come to the agreement, compared to adjudication, where our adjudicators will make an order based on the information you give them in your application and the outcomes that you seek. So they can't just arbitrarily go, I'm going to add this bit in the order. If you haven't asked for it, they can't necessarily just add it in. Okay, so big thing here, implications if the committee refuses permission for a pet. This is particularly if you have a bylaw that says pets are permitted with written permission or are only permitted with written permission of the body corporate. That's a classic permissive bylaw. The committee, it's been demonstrated in adjudicators' orders since 1997 that committees can't act unreasonably to say no to a pet under that bylaw. If you don't know the animal, what grounds have you got for saying no at that point? And that's what I was discussing before. If it then causes a problem, you take the path of getting rid of the animal, providing the evidence of the nuisance and that they're failing to comply with the bylaws and so forth. So you've got to remember that the committee, when making a decision, must act reasonably. So that's section 100 of the Act, and compared to the body corporate, must act reasonably in making or not making a decision under section 94 of the Act. Committee needs to consider some things. Is that a question?
Yeah, we do have a question.
Yeah?
I've heard that there's pending legislation or regulation that will that says that owners can have a pet. Is that correct?
The current Body Corporate and Community Management Act is under review, under the Property Law Review, along with a lot of other legislation. So there is reviews happening of pet bylaws and so forth. The last submission closed, the last paper closed in February, and I don't know if they're doing another paper for any other issues, but they're at that point of collating all the information and potentially, I think, drafting legislation. So we don't know what's going to go in there and what the changes are going to be. But if you subscribe to our newsletter, which is Common Ground, on our website, if you go under the main website, under the roles and responsibility page, you'll see what we do. You'll see, if you scroll down on that page, you'll find a link to Common Ground. If you haven't subscribed to that, subscribe to it, because we don't overwhelm you with information. Every 6 months we send out the newsletter, but we will also send you updates if something happens in between that time. So if something does particularly change, we would let you know through that. But it's new laws, it's got to go through Parliament, it's got to go through the whole process, so it's not happening tomorrow, I can tell you that. But the bylaw, if your bylaw says pets are permitted, then pets are permitted with written permission, depending on the wording of your bylaw. Okay, so things committees need to consider when they're approving animals. Is there an actual genuine likelihood that the animal will cause an adverse impact on the common property or any other owner-occupier? So we have had adjudicators support a committee decision as reasonable where they can demonstrate that there is a particularly adverse reaction from a particular animal being in that particular building. The example is, it was a high-rise, there was lifts, the person had a severe allergy to a dog, and in this particular case, the owner of the dog would have been taking the dog up and down in the lift, they said in their application, I think about 10 times a day, because it was a dog that needs lots of exercise. So that's a lot of exposure, and the adjudicator found that it was reasonable for the committee in those circumstances to say, no, we're not approving this pet in this particular situation. Doesn't mean you have to say no to all pets. Remember, committees can't blanket ban. It's case-by-case basis. So that's the biggest thing. If nothing else, take it away, case-by-case basis. So if the committee says no, the consequences might be that an owner puts it to a general meeting. If they try and request an EGM, that's an extra cost on the body corporate outside an AGM. Or lodging an application for adjudication will be another cost to the body corporate. So maybe the committee might need to think about, let's set some reasonable conditions and regulate it from the start, and then deal with if something comes up, because you can't make a decision on hypotheticals, okay? That just isn't possible. You might not like dogs, but that doesn't mean that this dog is going to be a problem, for example. So remember, when you're ringing us, we can't provide you a ruling as to whether the committee should or shouldn't approve a particular pet. We get that asked of us, and all we can say is that you've got to look at the circumstances of your scheme, read other adjudicators' orders. So as I said, I keep saying adjudicators' orders are available on the website. You're going to get this information emailed to you, but if you want to make a note of it, the website to find orders is what is it? It's Austlii, which is AUSTLII. This is coming in your information note, but austlii.edu.au. And you just have to drill down to Queensland and then down to body corporate. And then you can do keyword searches, and you can do searches just on bylaw orders. And if you want to have help with interpretation of your bylaws, that's a really good start. So just generally enforcing bylaws. As I said before, there's a BCCM Form 1. Anyone who has an issue with someone breaching the bylaws can give that to the committee. The committee then has 14 days, or at a general meeting, can make a decision, and they can advise the owner that that's the process if that's the case. And the committee then has to make a decision, or a general meeting decision must be made. There must be a decision to approve to issue a contravention notice. You can't just give one out. The body corporate manager can't give it out. They're not a decision maker. So then, of course, if a decision is made, the contravention notice is issued, which is your Form 10 or 11. As I said, the website, straight under the heading bylaws, you'll see a subheading bylaw enforcement. It is written there. You can access the forms, the steps, the process. So we've got the two forms. Our forms, BCCM Form 1 is a prescribed form. You must use that if you want to dispute a bylaw dispute further as a complainant about a bylaw breach. But Form 10 and Form 11, we've drafted them. They're office forms. They're for your convenience. They're based on, as it says there, Form 10, Section 182, and Form 11, Section 183. As long as you've got all the information required, you can write your own contravention notice. It can be a letter as long as it's got all the information required. That's why it's simpler to just use the form sometimes. So an example, when do you use which form? Form 10 is a continuing contravention notice. A person, for example, has an animal on the scheme without permission. The contravention is current and ongoing and not going away, so it's continuing. So that's a typical one that would be good for Form 10. Form 11 is called a future contravention notice. And a typical example of that is someone holds a party every Friday night, and they've been doing that for the last month. You know, next Friday night they're going to do the same thing because they've got the track record. Committee can issue that Form 11, which says to that person, you can't breach this bylaw for 3 months. If during that 3 months that person breaches the bylaw, the committee can just act to take it further if needed because they've got that 3-month time frame. If they have not complied with the bylaw and fixed whatever it is they're doing that's breaching the bylaw, the next step is either going to the magistrate's court or lodging an application with us. If you're lodging with us, we need to see evidence of a committee decision approving lodging with us, as well as the evidence of the notice in the first place. And that's the end of bylaws.